as usual, we like to have this as informal and as discussion provoking as possible. We're looking for your input, your advice. It is an advisory committee, and you're drawing upon your experience. So it's a little bit awkward doing this virtually. Hopefully this will be the last time we have to do it entirely virtually. We'll see as we look ahead to the next advisory committee meeting, which is tentatively scheduled for January. On the quarterly schedule, it would be December, which puts it smack dab in the middle of the holiday vacation season. So we'll probably do that in January of 2022. There are, of course, the monthly wayside cleanup office hours. It takes place at the same time, fourth Thursday of the month, 9 a.m. And if you Google wayside cleanup office hours, MassDEP, it should bring you to the information on how to log on to that. So having given you plenty of time to read all of that, I think we can get started. You should be seeing, everybody should be seeing the advisory committee members in the view, as well as the shared screen. Let me know if you don't through the chat, but we'll start. I'm Paul Locke. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the Wayside Cleanup Program here at MassDEP. And this is our quarterly Wayside Cleanup Advisory Committee meeting, September 23rd, 2021. So let's move ahead. The times are always approximate, particularly when I'm talking. We'll go through some updates for what we're doing here at MassDEP and Wayside Cleanup. Liz will get into more updates on things like APM telemetry and CAM and MCP amendments. And then the kind of big discussion that we do want to have with you, kind of kicking off this discussion, because it's unlikely to be solved this morning, is talking about capacity for contaminated soils greater than RCS2 and where they can go in the face of closing landfills and decreasing capacity. And then to close it out, we have our year in review stats. Some of this may be repetitive for those of you who sat in on the LSBA presentation last week, but I have added some more statistics and some interesting things that if you want to stick around for that, but we put that at the end so that if you do need to leave at some point, the statistics kind of speak for themselves, and they will be available as all of this presentation will be available on the web as well. So let's kick it off, unless anybody, advisory committee members, have any comments, suggestions before we start. No. Okay. And you guys should have the ability to unmute yourselves, and feel free to do that if you want to yell out a question. So the updates we're going to be covering more or less the kind of big things from the bigger MassDEP is we have been focusing on equity and diversity and environmental justice over the past year. We're going to continue to do that. One item that happened this summer was modifying our mission statement to very explicitly kind of state our commitment to address and advance environmental justice and equity for all people of the Commonwealth, provide meaningful, inclusive opportunities for people to participate in agency decisions that affect their lives, and ensure a diverse workforce that reflects the communities that we serve. That's how we're going about carrying out our mission for protecting the natural resources, air, water, and land, and protect the health. But it's not just DEP staff that have that responsibility. We're looking for everybody to participate in crafting the policies that we're developing, having input, bringing their perspective, because quite frankly, if you limit kind of what you're thinking about doing and the issues that you're tackling and the approaches that you're using to tackle those issues, if you limit your approach to just your own experience and your education and your background, then you're likely to be missing things. I would like to believe that the Wayside Cleanup Program has had active input from the stakeholder community over the years, and we're very proud of that, including this advisory committee. But it over the years, it is primarily the stakeholders specifically involved in the assessment and cleanup, the LSPs, the contractors, the consultants, the responsible parties, certainly, and immediate neighbors. It would be good to have as broad an outreach as possible. And that not only does that go for wayside cleanup, but for the entire DEP. All the programs are kind of looking at how we can do this better. There's a lot of work being done up at the Secretary's office on environmental justice, revising the EJ policy. And one interesting thing that came out in the budget this past year is requirements for looking at cumulative impact analysis, and whether that's up at MEMA, they're looking at how one does that, and talking about and planning for looking at how to take into account the cumulative impact, not only that a project has in the surrounding area, but that impact in the context of other impacts, other stresses, other burdens that might also exist in the same community. For us, where that is coming to the forefront is certain air permits will be required to take into account cumulative impact analysis. So our colleagues over in the Bureau of Air and Waste are currently looking at how to do that. It's something that we've, over the years, have looked at off and on, but it's always good to have a statutory requirement to actually take it into account, to focus your mind. And this will be done with a lot of stakeholder input as well. So I think that's particularly exciting, as back in the early 2000s, I participated in some cumulative impact work, and it's certainly an interesting and challenging way to look at things. As far as DEP operations are concerned, we're all still kind of figuring out how the pandemic has shaped our future lives. And the way it looks now, DEP is certainly going to a hybrid model. And that's has resulted from our experience in the pandemic. But I would like to believe that having gone through that process, we're also looking at it as kind of a more efficient, cost-effective way to do business, and one which actually will make everybody's working lives here at DEP a little bit more flexible, a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit more able to take into account how we need to combine work and home life and other responsibilities. So I think it's a really exciting prospect. It's too bad that we were pushed into this through the pandemic, but coming out the other side, it's great that we'll have this. Got some of the implications for that. The DEP headquarters at 1 Winter Street will be given up, and we'll be moving to 100 Cambridge Street, the Salt and Salt building, where the Secretary sits, and that's slated for the spring of 2022, next spring. I understand that they're clearing 3 floors, not 1 floor for DEP, but also DCR is being moved in, and other EOEA agencies being brought together. And part of the deal with this is that our space is going to be reduced, reflecting the hybrid model, that not all employees will be in the office every day at the same time. They're looking at about a 50% capacity on any given day. In order to support that, a lot of our files are being converted to electronic files. Here in Wayside Cleanup, we did most of that work back in 2009, and the LSB and the PRP communities have been submitting files, reports electronically through eDEP since then. And quite frankly, that was a huge help in getting us through the pandemic. And it's making this transition to a hybrid work model so much easier for Wayside Cleanup. For those of you who work with other programs, be advised that they are going to be going through the same growing pains and migration pains that Wayside Cleanup went through in 2009. There's a actions to scan the paper files that they have and convert them to electronic files and do that in an orderly fashion. Some of the staff in wayside cleanup that participated in our scanning projects 10 or more years ago are providing advice and expertise to help the other programs do that as well. And we're going to have great new technology. I'm looking forward to a day when we're running these meetings in a nice new conference room at 100 Cambridge Street, where people can come in and we'll have the technology to also live stream it so that there will be a virtual option with better technology than the way we were doing it back a couple of years ago when we were live streaming on YouTube. So I'm excited to see what comes out of all of this, but it will be better technology, better data systems, and a more flexible workplace, which will be, exciting, dynamic, engaging place for DEP to work. So if you know of staff, if you know of people coming out of college, graduate school, people with a few years of work experience, DEP is going to be a great place to work as it is now, but even better in the future. So send people our way, because people are going to be we're going to be hiring, partly because we're going to be retiring. And I say that kind of in the big broad sense of the word. We've had several retirements over the past few months. I expect several more in the coming months as well. We're an aging workforce at DEP. And we've had a number of people, Cynthia Pulowski out of the Western region, Mike LeBlanc in the Central region, just retired last week. Down in the Southeast region, Dennis Johnson, who worked in another program, retired, but that set off a chain of events where Gerard Martin, our former Deputy Regional Director for Wayside Cleanup, moved over to become Deputy Regional Director for the water programs. And John Handerhan moved up to become Acting Deputy Regional Director. So the retirements have a cascading effect, which is good. It opens up positions at various levels throughout the department. And again, people should keep checking our vacancy announcements, keep looking at what's out there, because we will be having more over the next year or so. PFAS. I'm going to go through these slides. I put them up. I had talked about them at the LSP Association meeting, and there's a lot of work being done on PFAS. Wayside Cleanup is just one of the programs that are dealing with PFAS, perhaps not the program that is most affected by it quite yet, but we're catching up. And pretty much all of the DEP programs are going to have some intersection with PFAS in their work lives. We're trying to normalize it, bring PFAS into the fold as just another hazardous material that is subject to Chapter 21E in the MCP. We're still learning a lot about it. So while we have guidance out there, we have our reportable concentrations, and we're doing work with the other programs, we're all still learning about it as we go along. And I think it is going to be, there will be changes and kind of evolution of DEP's approach as we move ahead. Our site discovery and cleanup program, we're finding sites through sampling that's being done for public water supplies. We're finding sites we're finding PFAS at sites that we already know about, particularly places like Department of Defense sites and Superfund sites, where when we start sampling for PFAS as well, we find it there. And we're having sites come in through the normal process, which is what I really like to see. Not that I want more PFAS sites, but it's great to see that we have reportable concentrations, and PRPs and LSPs are in working at sites where the conditions are such that PFAS compounds are potential contaminants of concern, that the sampling is being done, comparison to the RCs, and where appropriate notification occurs to us. The predominant sources are still far and away the AFFF firefighting foam at airports, at DoD sites, at fire training areas, and the like. There are a handful of commercial industrial sources, and there are a lot of locations where we're finding PFAS through the public and private well sampling programs, where it's not exactly clear where it's coming from yet, which brings me to the public and private well sampling programs. The slides are there when we post them on the web. You'll be able to follow the links to these dashboards. Dashboards is the word we use on the DEP website that is tracking the PFAS sampling that's going on. Because we now have an MCL, all the public water supplies in the state will be sampling for PFAS. All the major ones, the larger ones have, and they're working through size by size as you go down. The deadlines for sampling for the smaller and I always get stuck in these, the transient, non-community, non-transient, non-community, all the various variations on public water supplies will eventually be sampled. The state, the legislature has given us money to provide free sampling for the first round of this for all of public water supplies. So that work is going apace. And through that, we are finding some elevated levels because these are public water supplies. The primary point of contact and the primary program that's working with them is our drinking water program. First and foremost, to work with them to take actions to minimize or eliminate the exposure to PFAS in the public water supplies. And that has been working out fairly well. The options that they have are things like taking wells offline, doing blending, putting on treatments, both short-term and long-term. So that is keeping our drinking water program, our colleagues, very busy. And as the contamination is found, waste site cleanup will work with the drinking water program to look at and potentially do site discovery around those contaminated wells. On the private well side, there's money again available from the legislature to sample private wells. Not every private well in the Commonwealth, unfortunately, there's not enough money for that. But we are focusing on the 86 communities that primarily rely on private wells for drinking water supplies. And over 500 samples have been taken so far. And what we're finding is the vast majority of them are less than the MCL, 94% less than the MCL. And we had been finding that where it was above the MCL, it was typically in the 20 to 30 parts per trillion range. We're getting a lot of those. Fewer higher than that, but they do exist. And recently we have seen a couple private wells that have come in over 90 parts per trillion, which following the MCP risk characterization process would be what would trigger an imminent hazard under the MCP. Oh, excuse me. So we're working with the private well owners. Each of these is incredibly case specific. It takes a lot of resources for the regional staff working on these sites and working with the homeowners. And then as indicated, often we'll do bubble maps. We're calling them bubble maps, working out from the known areas of contamination to see if there's other affected wells in the area. All of this, again, is very case specific, but it is something that is taking up a lot of our time and effort and resources in the waste site cleanup program. We've been working with firefighters. Nick Child, who was the lead on this, retired this last spring, another retirement. But he has come back on a short-term contract to kind of continue doing some of this necessary work, working with the Department of Fire Services and the State Fire Marshal's Office on guidance for firefighters. We're also continuing the Take Back program as necessary. And we've been partnering with Connecticut DEP to look at fluorine-free foams. And we should have some information coming out about that in the near future, doing sampling of, testing the foams to see what is actually there. So a lot of work still going on there. We are getting sites coming in, as I had mentioned, through a variety of different ways. I really like the optics of the photographs from this. This is a landfill.
Paul, excuse
yes.
me. Your slides, I mean, at least I'm not seeing the slides change as you tap through that. From the only one.
I mean, neither. We're still on the map, Paul.
Yeah, on the dash.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for jumping in. Let me stop sharing and then I'll share again. Of course, now I'm not finding my little thing to stop sharing. Okay, like I said, we will most likely have technical glitches as we go through this. I'm not getting any of my little controls. Liz, can you take over sharing for a second, or
I'll
stop?
try.
Do you see a control to stop sharing?
Tell me where I'd find it.
If you go down to the share screen,
Yep.
you co-host should be able to stop sharing. And I apologize because I'm not seeing.
This will stop the other screen sharing. Yes.
Yep, there we go. Thank you.
Um,
And that hopefully will jolt it.
do you see mine?
It's on the agenda, Liz. But yes, it
Yeah.
says you're now viewing Elizabeth Callahan's screen, so
Excellent.
you're up.
Okay.
You can see the whole slide deck on the left-hand side.
Yeah, you probably need to go into that slide show mode and advance.
You were talking about a map, Paul, but do you want to quickly review these?
Well, I can't see what is there actually.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, you went through this one that said you were focusing on the 86 towns that primarily rely on private wells and
Yeah.
94% less than MCL. And so you covered that one.
I covered that one. I was on the one with the foam in the stream.
Yeah, I think it's the next one, Liz.
Yep. So pie chart. Here's
And then-
foam and stream.
Oh, take back. You already did this
We're
too.
working with DFS, et cetera. Take a second
Yep.
to look at that.
Now we're on Bondis Island.
Yeah,
landfill.
Bondis Island. Man, I'm so annoyed at this. Bondis Island is the landfill. There's a fire at the top of that on the compost material and wood debris. And because of number of things, including limited water supply, firefighting foam was used, and there's discharge out to the Connecticut River where our emergency response staff saw that, called out our contractors to put up boom to stop it, vacuum it up until the discharge ended. So there's still ongoing concerns about sites and the use of foam and making sure that when it's used, because there are appropriate uses for the foam and sometimes you need to use it. There are things that can be done, like putting out boom and catching it and containing it and vacuuming it up. And so DEP is working on that as well. Next slide, just to let people reinforce that we're working with everybody else in DEP on this. There's we're working, issues with wastewater, residuals, and pesticides, and surface waters, and landfills, and pretty much everything, every program at DEP. And we meet weekly with the commissioner to go over issues related to PFAS, make sure everybody is up to speed. So it's going to be something that will be in the front of people's minds for quite a while. And there's also, next slide. There's also the PFAS Interagency Task Force, which I would highly recommend. It's kind of hard to find. Searching for it, so when you get these slides, you can follow that link, masslegislature.gov, commissions detail /556. And they are still currently holding meetings. I would recommend you can also view all of the past meetings, the video from that. And I would highly recommend looking at that because as we find out more and more about PFAS, I would not be surprised if there's more legislative action kind of directing the state's long-term approach to this. Next slide, which is good. Liz, this is you.
Well, before we move on, let's just
do we have any
check. I
questions?
think there are some questions.
Okay.
Can you see the questions, Paul, or should I?
I cannot see a thing. I am not sure how to do this. So Liz, I may log out, and I'm not even sure I can do that.
Why don't you stay put?
Okay. And why don't you read the
And
question?
if you pull up your own version of the presentation, we can kind of keep in sync. Okay, so first question is, are there resources available to help homeowners with PFAS detections greater than 20? And second question, same questioner, how do detections that are simply above ND fit into the CEP paradigm? This is relevant not only to the detects identified in private wells as part of ongoing free sampling, but also how does it contrast with detections of any concentration may be identified down gradient from the source as part of the site investigation?
Yeah. So first, I would kind of reinforce the concept of CEP the CEP is for responsible parties, potentially responsible parties taking action under the MCP to reduce or eliminate exposures from drinking water sources, among a couple other things, while the larger site assessment is going on, where it's feasible to do that. So for these sites where we haven't, so as we're learning about them and we're working with the individual homeowners to do just that, the material that this whole thing is basically a big research project. And as the homeowners signed up, we tried to convey both in written form and in talking with them kind of what the possible outcomes and implications might be, including ultimately their responsibilities as the homeowner to reduce or eliminate their own exposures to contamination where it's found. For the sites, the situations where we do find elevated levels, we are working with them on things, discussing options like bottled water, options like point of entry treatment systems, or potentially point of use treatment systems, although that's still kind of a lot to be learned there in order to help them take those actions to do that. Unfortunately, there isn't a pot of money available to help homeowners do that. Where we do find imminent hazard levels, the DEP certainly has an obligation under the statute to ensure that those imminent hazards are abated and eliminated, and we do that working with the homeowners. And where we think further investigation is needed even in the short term, then DEP is taking on that responsibility to do that additional sampling in the area to see what else might be going out there. Our ultimate goal ultimately we would hope that in all cases we would find a PRP that would take on the responsibility for the full site assessment and cleanup. But until we know more about the sources of PFAS at various levels out there in the environment, then it's going to be a mix of DEP action, homeowner action, and PRP action, depending, again, on the very specific site circumstances. Since I can't see the questions, I hope that answered it.
So, Paul, there's one additional question. The slide for private well testing showed only 67% were non-detects, not 94%. 1/3 with detection seems higher than previously reported. Is that correct?
Well, I said 94% less than the MCL. So, which I think is still true. There's like six higher above the MCL in the above 20. What was the rest of that question?
It was a comment. 1/3 with detection seems higher than previously reported. Is that correct?
I don't think so. I'd have to go back and look at it. And we do have data from the past. I don't think so, though. I think it's been running about that. I think certainly even on the public water supply side, I think it was running about, public water supply was running about 10% above 20 parts per trillion, and the private water supplies were less than that. So I don't think this is out of line, but we can do that comparison at some point in the future.
Okay, and one follow-up. Are you collecting samples from properties adjacent to those where detections were found?
The bottom line is yes. They are, however, being prioritized. We're focusing on those locations where we're seeing higher levels, because we don't have the staff or funding at this point to immediately jump on everything. So there is a certain prioritization taking place, but over time, yes, the goal would be to find out what's going on in all of these locations.
Okay. So that's it for questions.
Paul, I just have a couple questions, if that's all right.
Sure.
One, I just want to thank you for putting in that point about trying to normalize PFAS in the MCP program. I think that's a great step to kind of get this to be dealt with not as a specialty, but just as an everyday piece of life now. So I appreciated hearing that. When you talked about the DEP programs that are working on PFAS internally, I didn't see any mention of air programs, and I'm just curious if that was an omission in your slide or if the air programs aren't getting involved in PFAS in Massachusetts at this point.
Everybody is getting involved. The air program, I think, is not as focused at the moment on it, but there certainly have been cases, and I don't know as much about it, but I believe that they are starting to look at and include PFAS in kind of air permits where it's appropriate. I know certainly where we know that there are air emissions, they have been working with us on sites that potentially include that. But yes, I think you're seeing more of a priority on the water programs kind of across the board, but everybody is going to be playing.
Sure. And then I know at the last advisory committee meeting, you talked about, these kind of, I believe it was central region and southeast region that were, kind of creating regional work groups. How are those coming along? Are they making progress? And what kind of time frame do you see for them to be fully up and running and getting into some of the backlog of source identification?
So the central region and southeast region have established sections specific for PFAS sites. Mike LeBlanc in Central was heading that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know offhand now that he is retired who's taking that, but somebody is, and I was told that and I've forgotten it. And if they're listening, I apologize. Southeast region, it is Angela Gallagher is the head of that group, and so they have, and they're set up. They're working on it. I laughed when you said getting at the backlog, because it is the establishment of those groups is a reflection of how much our time and energy has to be devoted just to keep up with what's coming in on things, particularly in the central region and southeast region, have been the regions hardest hit with PFAS, PFAS sites. Northeast region, perhaps less so, because such a large fraction of the region is on MWRA water, and a lot of our sites are coming in through the local public water supply testing programs. And the western region, there's high reliance on private wells, and I think as the private well program begins to cover more of the area out there, we'll probably be seeing more sites in the western region. So I think the other programs, the other two regions will probably catch up, but it may take a little time.
So we're still just trying to keep our heads above water right now. That's where we're at for the time
Yes.
being. Yeah, okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?